What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danelle Hallan, and I am back with another true crime video. And don't forget that if you would rather listen to this in podcast form, all you have to do is go ahead and search Crime Bit with Danelle Hallan, and it should pop up anywhere you consume all of your favorite podcasts. Now, today, we are speaking about the disappearance of 19-year-old Tyarra Williams, an intelligent and thriving young woman who vanished late at night from her apartment parking lot. She went missing on January 7th, 2016 in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so this hits me that much harder because I was born and raised in North Carolina. I'm very familiar with this area. I still frequently travel to Greensboro. And despite knowing the realities of true crime, obviously doing what I've done for the past however many years, there's just something about it being so close that always makes it that much more unsettling. Tyarra had a bright future. She had lots of plans. And somehow over the course of an hour, and honestly not even that, on one of the most exciting days of her life, she dropped off the face of the earth. So let's get into the details and hopefully help her family bring her home. Tyarra was born on June 18th, 1996. And as I said, she grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is pretty central in the state. And it's one of the major cities in North Carolina with a pretty big population. She was raised in a very loving and close family, which is probably why Tyarra had such a nurturing personality. She was always taking care of everyone around her, even when she was very young. For example, when she was only 3 years old, her brother Cannon was born, and she immediately assumed the motherly role. Their mom, Danelle, even joked about who was the actual parent. Everyone referred to Tyarra as Cannon's midi bodyguard. She really ran things. She had a huge heart that was open to everyone. She's very empathetic and aware of others, almost to a fault at times. Tyarra was the kind of person that didn't want to rock the boat. She didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, even if sometimes it came at the expense of her own. When she was 7 years old, her parents split up, and being who she was, she stepped up even more to help out her now single mother. And it remained this way into her teens. Tyarra was doing great in school. She attended Dudley High School in Greensboro, and in her junior year, she realized what she wanted to do in life. She took an early childhood education class that year, and she excelled in it. It meshed perfectly with her personality and her passions, and so she decided she wanted to work with kids, and not just that, but specifically kids with disabilities. And along with working on her education, which was something that meant a lot to her, she also had a very big social life. And this is kind of where Tyarra and her mom would butt heads. Tyarra's mom was very protective of her and kind of knew the realities of social media and the dangers, and she just really wanted to make sure that Tyarra stayed on track. So Tyarra had a lot of rules. For example, when she wanted to set up a Facebook page, the ground rules were set that Tyarra had to be friends with her mom and allow her mom access to the page to make sure that nothing funny was going on. And Tyarra was okay with this, but the older that she got, the more she really pushed against those rules her mom had set in place, which isn't unusual at all for a teenager. I know that when I was a teen, I pretty much didn't want any rules at all, which my poor parents, but she just wanted a little bit more freedom. She wanted some wiggle room and she wanted to make her own decisions. So in her senior year, Tyarra decided to move in with her grandmother, Vanessa. But I want to make it very clear that this was not a huge deal. There wasn't a big falling out between Tyarra and her mom. It was just a mutual agreement. They thought this would work out really well. At the time, Tyarra, her mom, and her brother Cannon were all living at the Stony Brook apartment complex, and her grandmother, Vanessa, lived in that same complex, so it wasn't even like she was going far. She was legitimately in like a building or two over. And it wasn't just because Tyarra wanted a little bit more freedom, but Tyarra also said that she didn't want her grandmother living at home alone. So it was her caretaker side really coming out, but her grandmother has joked repeatedly that she thinks that Tyarra just liked her cooking more, and that's why she wanted to move in. So even after Tyarra moved out of her mom's apartment, she was still bouncing back and forth, and her relationship with her family didn't change at all. In 2014, Tyarra ended up graduating from high school, and she decided that she wanted to take a semester off to make sure that she was prepared for college. And by December of 2015, Tyarra decided that she was ready. She registered at Guilford Tech and planned to study early childhood education. She was able to enjoy the holidays with her family, and once the new year hit, she was ready to tackle that next step in life. But unfortunately, this was a step that she never got to take. Thursday, January 7th, 2016, at around 7:30 a.m., Tyarra woke up nervous but mostly excited. She got ready and she headed out to Guilford Tech to finish registering for her classes. She had to finish up her financial aid paperwork, and she planned to get her new school ID. And she was scheduled to start classes the following week. Now, after she had all of that sorted out, around 6 p.m. that day, Tyarra headed to her mom's apartment to share with her how her day had gone. And according to her mother, Danelle, she was all smiles. You really could feel the excitement radiating off of her. If you think about it, this was something that she had wanted to do since she was a junior in high school, and her whole entire life, she had loved taking care of people. So now that she was making this her career choice, her life journey, it was huge for her. She told her mom all about her classes, and she showed her new school ID, and they even made plans to go back to school shopping the following day, which was always my favorite part of going back to school. They were going to get textbooks and all of the things that Tyarra was going to need for success. At the time, Tyarra was dating a guy named Aaron, and he lived in the Stony Brook apartment complex as well, and he was actually good friends with Cannon. So he ended up showing up to Tyarra's mom apartment that night as well, and he and Cannon were playing video games while Tyarra was taking down her mom's Christmas tree, because she convinced her mom to put that Christmas tree up in the first place by promising to take it down. And now they're getting like into January, and her mom's like, please take this tree out of this living room. And so she went ahead and got started on it, and even doing a task that I'm pretty sure everybody loathes, she was still in a great mood. That's how excited she was about how her day went. Now, once she was done with the Christmas tree, Tyarra, Aaron, and Cannon all decided to make their way back to the grandmother's apartment for dinner. And afterwards, the three of them sat down on the couch to hang out for a while. Tyarra was on her phone, which was very common for her. They said that her phone was basically an extension of her arm. She was always on it. She was never without it. And the boys were watching football. But at around 8:30 p.m., Tyarra suddenly got up and said that she was going to meet a longtime friend of hers named Travis. Now, neither Cannon nor Aaron recognized this name. It doesn't even seem that Tyarra had even mentioned this person before, but Tyarra explained that she would only be gone for around an hour, and then she was going to hang out with Aaron again. Now, the three of them then walked out to the apartment parking lot, and Tyarra headed off on foot. At the time, she was wearing a pink shirt, a black North Face jacket, some Levi jeans, a pair of sneakers, I think they were Jordans, and a royal blue kind of beanie. But nobody had any idea that she wouldn't make it back home that night. Aaron and Cannon went back to the grandmother's apartment after she headed off on foot, where they decided to watch TV for a bit before heading back to Aaron's apartment to play some video games. But once 9:30 hit, there was no sign of Tyarra. Normally, she would have been texting Aaron, but there was silence. I'm assuming at this point that Cannon went home, and Aaron decided to go back to the grandmother's apartment to wait for Tyarra, because that was the plan. But she wasn't showing up. Now, over the next few hours, Aaron repeatedly called and texted Tyarra, but all of the calls were going straight to voicemail. So eventually, he just went to sleep thinking that she would be home in the morning. But when he woke up around 7 a.m. for an appointment that he had, Tyarra was still nowhere to be found. Now, he did go to his appointment, and afterward immediately started to try to reach out to Tyarra again, but he was still getting no response. And so he was incredibly worried at this point and went right to Tyarra's grandmother's house, woke her up, and told her that he believed Tyarra was missing. And right away, understandably, panic set in. Tyarra's purse and her ID were still in the apartment, and her phone charger was still plugged into the wall. It didn't seem that she made it home at all the night before, and it also didn't seem that she took anything with her, expecting to be gone for any length of time. Tyarra's grandmother also tried to reach out to her by phone, but was being sent straight to voicemail as well. So she reached out to Danelle to tell her that Tyarra was missing. Danelle immediately felt that something was wrong because Tyarra was always a very responsible young woman. She kept in touch with her family. She always told everyone where she was going. And as I have already stated, her phone was an extension of her arm. She never let that phone die. She always had a charger with her. So the fact that her phone was dead, she didn't take her charger, and it had been well over 12 hours at this point. All of this was entirely out of character for Tyarra. And at around noon, when Tyarra still hadn't come home, Danelle decided to go and speak to Aaron because at this point, he was one of the last to see her. And he explained what Tyarra said her plans were the night before, that she was going to meet this guy he didn't know named Travis. Aaron explained that he assumed, based on the way Tyarra was describing it, that this was a longtime family friend of theirs. But Danelle said that they knew nobody by that name. So she decided to hop onto a computer to look at Tyarra's Facebook, hoping that maybe it would give them some answers. She went through Tyarra's entire friends list, and there was nobody with the name of Travis. And a lot of her friends went by nicknames, aliases, what have you. She checked every way she possibly could for someone that could be tied to the name of Travis, but still nothing. So she decided to go through Tyarra's private messages to see if maybe that would offer up any clues. Danelle ended up finding out that Tyarra had been messaging back and forth with an ex-boyfriend of hers. And not just that, but they had been speaking for that whole week, and she had met with him a handful of times, and nobody knew about it. Putting the dots together, Danelle realized that this Travis person Tyarra was talking about was very likely just an alias, that Tyarra was probably planning to meet with her ex that night, but didn't want to say his real name to avoid suspicion with Aaron and her brother. And it doesn't seem, based on the way they've described it, that her family was a big fan of this ex-boyfriend. Her mom has stated that the only reason Tyarra seemed to be drawn to him was because he was a bad boy. He had his own car, he was a cool kid, but obviously that thrill eventually faded, and at that point she didn't want anything to do with him anymore. They were not compatible, but he just kept on coming back. Tyarra's mom said every time she would think that this guy was gone for good, he would randomly pop up without warning. The messages between Tyarra and this ex showed that she was never the one reaching out to him. He was always the one repeatedly reaching out to her, and he was very persistent. And being the kind person that she was, she had a very hard time just ignoring him. She didn't want to make him feel bad. She was always under this hopeful mindset that she could still be friends with everyone. So he really wasn't getting the hint and was sticking around. It was alarming that this was potentially the last person that she may have been with. But her family was holding on to hope. Her mom hoped that she just went to a friend's house and forgot to reach out, or something that would explain her disappearance. She said that for the first time, she hoped that Tyarra had just made some poor decision and run off to be a rebellious teen without telling anyone. But by 8 p.m. that night, when there was still no sign of her, Tyarra was reported missing to Greensboro Police Department. Right away, police came out to the apartment complex and they agreed that something felt off. Tyarra had been so excited that day to start school. It took a lot of effort to get all of that set up and done. She had been with several people that day who agreed that she was in a good mood. Between that and leaving all of her belongings behind, it just didn't seem that this was a runaway situation. She had a good relationship with her family. She wasn't having troubles with anyone. So her mom told police all about this Travis guy and how she believed it was actually Tyarra's ex. She gave them all of the Facebook messages and said that she believed he may have more information. The following day, while police were getting Tyarra's phone records and tracking down her ex, her family set out to look for her. They couldn't sit and wait any longer, hoping that she would show back up. They printed out flyers and put them on cars and doors and spoke to everyone they could in the Stony Brook apartment complex. But nobody recalled seeing Tyarra. How she managed to go out into this parking lot, not even a very rural, quiet area, and just vanish into thin air was beyond bizarre. Police were able to narrow down that Tyarra's phone was still on and working at 8:30 p.m. when she headed off on foot to meet Travis. It was pinging in the apartment complex lot, so all of that matched up. But shortly after this, it went dark. Either her phone died or the GPS was turned off. From that point on, no more calls or texts were sent or received to her phone. When they finally found her ex-boyfriend, who has still not publicly been named, by the way, he was brought in for questioning, and at first, he lied. He told authorities that he hadn't been in communication with Tyarra at all. I mean, he was really trying to distance himself from her, but once they confronted him that they had all of these Facebook messages indicating otherwise, he had no choice but to change his story. Her ex now said that he had been talking to Tyarra that entire week, and he had in fact met her that night she went missing. So he was in fact this Travis that she had been speaking about. He claimed that Tyarra met him at his car in the parking lot, but they only sat there speaking for maybe about 30 minutes. And at around 9 p.m., he claimed she hopped out and headed back in the direction of the apartment building. After this, he didn't see or hear from her again. And I just find it so strange that, they were in the parking lot together. He could have easily seen her, walk most of the way to the apartment. We're talking about such a short time frame for something to have happened. It's just really bizarre to me because it is also incredibly cold in North Carolina in early January. So I highly doubt she would want to stand out there in the freezing cold darkness by herself for very long. Greensboro Police Department decided to bring in the ex's car to do a full forensic sweep. They checked for Tyarra's DNA, her hair, fingerprints, blood, anything at all that could indicate that something happened to her in that car. But they found nothing, so they had no choice but to move on. So instead, they focused on another of her ex-boyfriends named Trey. But Trey was very quickly ruled out. He was devastated to hear that Tyarra was missing, and not only did he speak to the police, but he also reached out to her mom and reassured her that he was not involved. They had broken up, but it wasn't ever anything awful. Tyarra's mom said that she just realized they wanted different things in life, and that was it. So police had nothing at this point. She didn't have any enemies. All of her ex-boyfriends had been spoken to. I don't believe the first ex-boyfriend was fully ruled out. It's never been stated anywhere, but they had nothing to go off of. There were no security cameras at the complex. Tyarra didn't have a car to go anywhere. She hadn't messaged anyone else to come pick her up or anything. She was just yards away from her apartment, so in theory, she should have made it back home. What could have possibly happened in such a short amount of time and such a public place where no one saw anything? So at this point, it sounded like maybe someone was lurking nearby at the perfect time and they took her. So on January 11th, the same day that Tyarra was supposed to start her college journey, her case was handed to the Crimes Against Persons Squad. They went out and spoke to residents and focused heavily on searching the areas around the complex. It is surrounded by lots of woods, creeks, culverts, and each one was thoroughly checked for signs of Tyarra, whether that's clothing or jewelry, a shoe, but they found nothing.
Around the Triad have seen this picture of missing teen Tyarra Williams around the area for about a week now. Early Saturday morning, people in this community decided to take that search to the streets.
So another 10 to 15, okay?
In groups, they went door to door, car to car, combing through wooded areas around the Stony Brook apartments in Greensboro, searching for any trace of 19-year-old Tyarra Williams.
We're looking to check, double check, and triple check.
It's been 9 days since Tyarra's family and friends say they last saw or heard from the teen.
She was still in our apartment complex when she was last seen. She was walking through from one side of the apartment complex to the next.
Her mom, Danelle, said on January 7th, Tyarra mentioned that she was headed to a friend's house and that she'd be back in about an hour. Tyarra hasn't been heard from since. That friend could be a clue, but
we don't know who it was she was going to see.
Since then, billboards, flyers, and thousands of posts on social media have been dedicated to helping find Tyarra Williams. The morning of the search, Greensboro PD said they didn't have any update on where she might be, but the family is leaning on faith.
We believe in miracles, and God, we ask for a miracle this day.
And her mother stands steadfast in hope.
I hope we find her. I hope we find her.
Greensboro police reached out to the media in hopes that it would help to generate tips because it seems things were a little bit slow in the beginning. Her family also set up a Facebook page and her grandfather Darryl set up a tip line. And as soon as all of this was in place, tips started flowing in. 2 tips came in right away, both alleged sightings of Tyarra. One of them was a sanitation worker who claimed that he saw a girl matching Tyarra's description in a dark jacket walking disoriented on a road in High Point, North Carolina. Now, High Point is about 20 minutes or about 17 miles away from Greensboro, and this would be the first larger city that you would hit if you left Greensboro on the highway going west. But for her to get this far, again, someone would have had to take her. But then another tip indicated that Tyarra might still be in Greensboro, so we've kind of got some conflicting information here. A woman called in saying that she saw someone that looked like Tyarra in Greensboro walking along Textile Drive. Textile Drive is only 8 miles or so away from the apartment on the northern side of Greensboro, and it's just a residential road. It's not really close to anything out of the ordinary. I don't really see why someone would be walking in the area unless they lived over there. While I don't know if these sightings were ever confirmed, it led Tyarra's family to believe that something that nobody wants to consider when it comes to a missing loved one, that maybe these tips are connected. Maybe someone was carting Tyarra around, and maybe she ended up in human trafficking. I know enough about Greensboro that I don't, for a moment, question that as a possibility. Now, Greensboro isn't inherently bad, but there is a lot of crime that goes on over that way. On top of that, there is a major highway. There's actually multiple major highways that run along this area, and this apartment complex is just a few minutes off of one of those main highways. So when it comes to trafficking, it's unfortunately a pretty prime location for that. And as if that's not horrifying enough, another really scary tip came in. Someone claimed that Tyarra's body was in the back of a tractor trailer on a lot near the apartment complex. Immediately, police headed out to the lot along with her family, and they checked in every single trailer, but ultimately nothing was found. I don't know if someone reported this as a prank or if they were simply reporting a rumor they heard because it's better safe than sorry, but I can't even imagine how her family felt wandering that lot, probably with mixed emotions of wanting to find her, but definitely not that way. By February 8th, authorities headed out again to search the area around the complex. They had nothing leading them in any other direction, and it seemed most likely that if foul play was involved, it happened right in that area. And while they did conduct a good search, most of the smaller streams and culverts were frozen over, so they had to wait until spring to check again. Tyarra's family continued speaking out on Facebook. They continued to put up her flyers, and then in the end of February, there was a shocking turn. Trey, that one ex of Tyarra's, was found shot to death outside of his apartment. Authorities and her family had to consider the possibility that maybe these two are connected. Maybe she was caught up in something. Maybe he found something out that he shouldn't have. It was very, very scary to consider. Maybe she was caught up in something, or maybe he had found something out that he shouldn't have in regards to her disappearance. His roommate had killed him over a silly dispute. And instead, this turned into yet another reminder that Tyarra wasn't there. She couldn't be at the funeral of someone that she deeply cared about. The next 2 months were pretty quiet. There weren't really many promising tips that came in. Not many searches could be conducted because of the weather, but in April of 2016, Danelle ended up receiving a very unexpected Facebook message that got the ball rolling again. The message was from a server that worked at a Waffle House located in Jessup, Georgia. So we're talking about a town almost 400 miles away from Greensboro. And if trafficking was the case, it wouldn't at all be surprising that somehow Tyarra ended up in Georgia. This server was confident that Tyarra had been to the restaurant several times, so not even just once. Like, they felt they had watched her for a long time now. They claimed that she came in with a group of people, but it didn't seem like she was really a part of this group. She was just tagging along. She never really made eye contact with anyone. She didn't really speak to the people that she was there with. She just looked uncomfortable or unhappy. And so upon hearing this information, Tyarra's grandfather, Darryl, jumped in his car and made the 6-hour drive to Georgia. And you guys, he sat for days in the parking lot of this Waffle House, waiting for this person to show up again, hoping that maybe it was Tyarra and he'd be able to snatch her and take her home. But this person never came back. The server, however, remained very adamant that this was her. She saw Tyarra, and she encouraged him to not give up, to continue looking in the area. So Darryl decided to take Tyarra's missing person flyers to several businesses and hotels nearby, and one manager came forward and said that they also believed they saw Tyarra at this hotel. So this just made it seem even more possible that they were on the right track. The manager told Darryl that there was a man who would come into the hotel with a group of young women, and he was a well-known pimp in the area. One of the girls that he frequently came in with looked a whole lot like Tyarra. Police were notified right away of all of these potential sightings, and the next time that this man came into the hotel, authorities jumped on it. They questioned him about Tyarra, and it seems that they spoke to the girls that he was with, and in the end, it wasn't her. It was a girl that looked just like her. So all of these sightings in the area, at the Waffle House, this hotel, it was just a doppelganger. And while I'm sure that was so disappointing, the fact that the community so far away was so dedicated to try to find Tyarra does restore some of my faith in humanity. Tips continued to come in, some of them suggesting this idea that Tyarra had in fact been thrown into human trafficking. Sightings came in from all across the country in different towns. People would claim they saw her on an ad on Craigslist and other questionable places, but it doesn't seem they could ever track her down or confirm any of these tips. And unfortunately, when it comes to human trafficking, if any of those were in fact her, these girls are moved around so quickly, especially if it's someone like Tyarra that has a whole army looking for her. They're never going to keep them in one place for too long because how easily they could be found. So Tyarra's grandfather at this point took matters into his own hands, and he went on a mission to find her himself. He drove all over the country, visiting trafficking hotspots, seedy motels, underground places. He was speaking to some dangerous people, and he was even offering up cash rewards everywhere that he went. He had been a bail bondsman, so he said that from experience, he knew that if you keep on asking, someone will eventually give you an answer. So he would walk into these places with $10,000 cash and give people a time limit. He says, hand Tyarra over or this reward is gone. He so strongly believed that she was being held somewhere and that eventually the money that he offered would be seen as more valuable than a secret that someone was holding. And the authorities backed him on this. The relationship that Tyarra's family seems to have with authorities in general is honestly one that I wish every single family could have. The authorities listened very closely to what Tyarra's family had to say, not just about her and what they believed could be going on, but they also considered their ideas and helped them act on looking into them. So it wasn't surprising at all to me that they decided to encourage her grandfather to keep on looking for her because they felt that he was able to get way more information from these places than they would ever be able to get. But after a few months of relentless searching, nothing was found. By the following spring, May of 2016, authorities finally were able to conduct more searches of the area, specifically in the creeks and the culverts. But again, they found nothing. And honestly, props to them for going back and making sure they checked every single area they could. So at this point, Tyarra's family decided to go back to square one. They started at the beginning to see if there's something that had been missed, if something could explain what happened to Tyarra, if there was someone they should look into, and ultimately they asked police to focus on Aaron again, her boyfriend at the time. It had always unsettled them that he never really questioned Tyarra going to meet another guy that night. He never asked who this person was, why she was meeting him. He didn't try to stop her, and it really felt off. If he decided to go and investigate when Cannon had headed home, did he see her in the car with another guy and get upset? Did he approach her when she was walking back home? While they thought that he was a good guy, they still had their questions. You can't rule anything out when it's been this long and no answers. Even more so because they also knew that Tyarra was planning on leaving him. Tyarra had recently confided in her mom that they just weren't really compatible as a couple. She agreed that he was a great guy, but she really only wanted to be friends with him and had no idea how to go about telling him. She didn't want to hurt his feelings, which is, again, just such a Tyarra thing. She never wants to bring harm to anyone. They were also neighbors, though. It was probably going to be weird afterwards. And maybe he figured this out and there was an argument. There are just so many different ways that this could possibly go. So authorities did in fact go back and question Aaron. And initially, he was very upset. He felt like he had been betrayed by her family. He explained to them that Tyarra going missing had drastically affected his life. He cared about her deeply, and her disappearance had sent him into a depression. And he'd even considered ending his own life because he was so distraught over what happened. Every single day for him was filled with sadness and anger and confusion and guilt. He was mad at himself that he didn't think to ask more questions about this Travis guy. He was mad that he didn't stop her from going. It was a gigantic coulda, woulda, shoulda situation, and he wished he had done differently. He explained to the police and her family again that he genuinely in that moment thought that he was just being chill, that he was being the cool boyfriend who wasn't jealous or controlling. He trusted her, and it went really badly. But while he did initially feel that betrayal and feel hurt by the family really suggesting authorities look into him, he also said that he completely understood that if he was in Tyarra's family's position, he would want to check and double check and triple check and ask all the questions as well. So he remained fully cooperative with police, and ultimately they were able to rule him out. On June 13th, 2016, another tip was called in, and it seems to be the last large tip, or at least possible sighting in Tyarra's case. And this time it was a family member. Now, this family member called in to report that they thought they saw Tyarra in the Greensboro DMV parking lot, and the interaction was odd. This family member called out Tyarra's name to this person, and the person did stop and turn around. They said they didn't know who Tyarra was, but they would pray for her. And it wasn't like the family member said that Tyarra was a missing person. So why was this stranger's first reaction to say that they were praying for her? It felt possible that this individual knew something. Authorities went to the DMV to gather surveillance, and they did in fact find a young woman potentially matching Tyarra's description. But once they showed this footage to Tyarra's mother, she confirmed that it wasn't her daughter. There were so many potentially valid sightings in this case. The roller coaster of emotions that her family has felt wading through them all is probably so overwhelming. From this point on, things really quieted down. Disappear did air an episode in 2018. Tyarra's family continued to push the Facebook page, and in November of 2020, Nick Mick released a video filled with photos of Tyarra to hopefully bring some renewed attention to her case. Tyarra's family have done several interviews, but it seems at this point they have stopped. I can only imagine it is exhausting and devastating every single time to relive this nightmare. Just last year, Greensboro Police Department did announce that they brought on 2 retired detectives to solely focus on looking into cases, including Tyarra's. So at least there is now a new and fresh set of eyes on the information. And one of the detectives did say that a tip came in with their renewed effort, and it was someone who had been sitting on this piece of information for like 6 some years. Ultimately, the tip wasn't connected to the case, but this goes to show you that there are people out there that have information and don't bring it forward for years and years. They wait until they feel comfortable, or they, see something that reminds them of this person, and then they bring it forward. Investigators at this point believe that someone living in the area of the apartment complex has information. It's just about encouraging those people to come forward. And because this did happen so long ago and it's an apartment, people typically don't live there for very long. These people may live somewhere else now, and again, just need that little reminder of, hey, this young girl is still missing and her family still needs her to be brought home. If you scroll through the Facebook page dedicated to Tyarra, all you see is post year after year of her mom wishing her a happy birthday. It's like scrolling through a timeline of the grief and pain that her family has felt this entire time, praying for Tyarra to come home, promising to never give up. And one post by her mom on August 7th, 2016, I believe still rings true and is a reminder to whoever may have been involved in Tyarra's disappearance. And I thought it was the perfect way to end the video. Quote, "To the person involved in her disappearance, I know you're reading this. I know you watch every day to see what we know or how close we are. Well, know this, we have not given up. We've not stopped looking for her. This case is still very much open, and we will never reveal our hand. Do not allow your soul to become comfortable, because everything happens in God's time and in God's way. Just because you don't see the fight does not mean we're not still fighting. The search has not ended. The search continues. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and go, you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to Tyarra's story. If you have any information at all on her whereabouts or what may have happened to her, as always, I have all of the numbers and different ways you can get that information into the right hands down below in the description box. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Hallan fam so that we can hopefully bring them home together or bring them justice together, and I will see you guys in my next video.